The reason you're watching this video, and I'm able to record it, is because someone invented or developed all of the components necessary to do so. The microphone, the video editing software, the audio editing software, computers, the internet, smartphones, etc. And any new product, of course, must be tested. Depending on the consequences of the failure modes of the product, testing can range from minimal to comprehensive. The microphone I'm using probably underwent significantly less testing than, say, a pacemaker, because the results of failure of the former are nowhere near as severe as those of the latter. That being said, care has to be taken when testing a new product, because you don't want to find a potentially fatal new failure state while a living person is using the product. And that would have been some good advice to remind the following people about, but it's a bit late for that now. Let's take a look at the unfortunate, and if we're being honest, occasionally dumbass souls who lost their lives testing products on themselves. Some were homemade, some were professionally made but may not have been worn or tested correctly. Some of these scenarios are actually understandable, but some are Darwin Awards worthy for their thoughtlessness. We'll start with Carl Wilhelm Otto Lilienthal. He is sometimes referred to as the father of flight for his contributions to the field of aviation prior to the Wright brothers' first successful flight of a non-glider aircraft in 1903. Lilienthal was flying gliders as far back as the 1890s, which he referred to sometimes as airplanes, but they were truly gliders. He was regarded as the first modern man to fly, nonetheless, and his achievements were regularly documented by media at the time. And despite his gliders not being true aircraft, the Flying Man, as Lilienthal was known, is credited with developing the concept of the modern airplane wing. All this would literally come crashing to a halt on August 9, 1896. Lilienthal had already flown his glider 3 times that day successfully. Unfortunately, the fourth run would not go so well. Shortly after launching himself off a slope at the Rhino Hills near Stollen, Germany, his glider pitched up, causing him to lose control. Despite his best efforts to regain control of the glider, it stalled, and he plummeted roughly 5 stories to the ground. He broke his third cervical vertebra, and may have also suffered head trauma, and died 36 hours later. Amongst his last words were, quote, "Sacrifices must be made." Unfortunately for him, he was the sacrifice on that day. Unlike some of the people in this video, I do have sympathy for Otto Lilienthal. Effectively, he was a test pilot before any kind of safety knowledge about aviation even existed. Test pilots to this day walk into work every day knowing they could be piloting a death trap that could fail at any time. The thing is, modern aviation would not be as safe or reliable as it is without these people. This is the reason I use the phrase occasionally dumbass souls in the intro. Lilienthal doesn't fall into the dumbass category. Neither do modern test pilots. The unfortunate reality of aviation is that you can't test the product without putting it in the air, and you can't put it in the air without a pilot. A certain amount of risk comes with that, but not necessarily a stupid amount of risk. Most of the rest of the subjects in this video really should have known better. These stories aren't about someone accepting the high amount of risk for a good cause, but someone being so lacking in self-awareness and or logic to even recognize or appreciate the risks. Let's start by talking about the guy who lost his life testing a homemade parachute. Born in October of 1878, Franz Reichelt was a French tailor and inventor of Austro-Hungarian descent and a pioneer in parachuting. He had earned the nickname the Flying Tailor. He had begun his parachute design career by dropping dummies out of the window of his fifth floor apartment. Apparently, some of his initial dummy drop experiments were successful. He wanted to design a suit for pilots that could function as a parachute if the pilots were forced to eject from their planes in the air, but his attempts at that were less successful than his initial dummy drops. He ran into issues converting his successful silk parachute design into the desired wearable version. He was convinced that he needed more height to allow his dummies to reach an optimal speed for his parachute suit to work. So for years, he petitioned the Parisian government to let him test it by dropping the parachute and presumably its dummy occupant from the Eiffel Tower. On February 4th, 1912, he was granted that permission. Part of the reason he was granted that permission was because it was believed, perfectly reasonably, that he was going to drop a dummy to the ground. When he arrived on that day, however, Reichelt had apparently gone full Pedro Serrano and said, "F you, I'll do it myself." He declared that instead of dropping a dummy, he would be wearing the chute suit for the test. Despite protesting by several of his friends and the initial resistance of the Parisian police, he was not to be dissuaded, and for the test, he became the dummy. Take that last sentence for what you will. He climbed to the first deck of the structure, which is 187 feet or 57 meters off the ground, and after about 40 seconds of what I can only assume was a rational portion of his brain telling them that this was an awful idea, he jumped off the platform. Now, in the movie Major League, when Pedro Serrano says, F you, Jobu, I'd do it myself, he hit a home run. Franz Reichelt, however, did not hit a home run. He hit the ground, fatally. His fall was even recorded on video, although I'm sure the video quality in 1912 was less than stellar. No one really seems to know why he decided to needlessly risk his own life rather than drop a dummy. It's not like he didn't have access to dummies, he'd already dropped them out of his apartment window. Perhaps he was so overconfident in his abilities that he convinced himself that his suit would work. Maybe he was just desperate to attract attention and to find sponsors for his work, although he could have just as easily accomplished that with a test fall with a dummy if the shoot had worked. Regardless of Reichelt's motives, this falls squarely into the Darwin Award-worthy category to me. What I said earlier about not being able to put test planes in the air without humans in them doesn't apply here. You can test parachutes without people in them. Franz Reichelt had already tested parachutes without people in them. He could have absolutely done this test with a practically 0% chance of self terminating. Our next subject comes to us from England. A man named Jordan Easton was wearing what he believed to be a stab proof vest. He wanted to demonstrate the stab proofiness of his vest to his friends, so he went into a friend's kitchen and grabbed something to test the garment with. Quote, he grabbed a knife to prove it was stab proof body armor and soon realized it wasn't. End quote. And if you think those words are just someone being callous and unsympathetic toward Easton's death, I should inform you that that was a quote from the coroner assigned to the case. In court. He grabbed the knife and plunged it into the middle of his chest, and upon he and everyone else watching finding out his outfit wouldn't in fact stop a stabbing, he was rushed to the hospital. Despite the best efforts of the hospital staff, they were unable to save him. Like with Reichelt's parachute, why would anyone test something like this while wearing it? Stab-proof vests, somewhat surprisingly, are a real thing. Not having any type of combat background myself, I don't know what situation someone would be walking into where they choose a stab-proof vest over a bulletproof one, especially since the latter can, depending on material, also be at least stab resistant. This stab-proof garment could have been put on a dummy, a tree, the ground, any of which could have tanked at least a stab or two without shuffling off this mortal coil. After stabbing it once and seeing the knife go right through it, that might be a clue to rethink human trials. Also, if you're going to insist on wearing a stab-proof vest for testing, why not at least stab yourself in the shoulder rather than the middle of your torso, which is filled with the high-value squishy organs? I get the feeling the thought process that went into this was the equivalent of hold my beer and watch this. And just like how the stab-proof vest wasn't stab-proof, bulletproof vests may or may not be bulletproof depending on the circumstances. Also, from what research I've done into bulletproof vests, getting struck by a bullet while wearing one can still hurt like hell even if the vest stops a projectile. Suffice it to say, testing them while wearing them isn't any smarter than our previous subject with the stab-proof vest. Parker Lynch of Arizona, USA, died after putting on a bulletproof vest and asking two of his friends to shoot him. They had previously been shooting a .223 single-shot rifle at the vest. Lynch then put the vest on, got shot in the abdomen, and was fatally wounded. Now, bulletproof vests will degrade when hit. Like any material, they can only take so much physical stress before they fail. Fabric-based vests will have the fabric eventually tear, and plate-based vests are designed to have the plates crack when struck. In both types of vest, the damage reduces the effectiveness of the vest in the area of the impact for subsequent shots. I'd be willing to wager that nothing is truly bulletproof if you shoot it enough. And recall that I had said that Lynch and his friends had shot the vest repeatedly. I didn't see in the research what kind of vest it was, but it was bound to be compromised by the time Lynch donned it. Unsurprisingly, the weakened vest failed when Lynch was shot. Our next person of interest is Mad Mike Hughes of California, USA. It's not really a surprise that someone nicknamed Mad Mike would wind up in a video like this. So what manner of contraption led to Mad Mike's demise? I have to admit, it's one of the more impressive ones in the piece. Hughes died testing a homemade steam-powered rocket. Hughes was a flat Earth conspiracy theorist and wanted to be able to get high enough in the air to hopefully get evidence of the Earth's shape. Flat Earth nonsense aside, though, he had apparently flown this or a similar rocket before and successfully landed it, so this wasn't just some yahoo who strapped some, I don't know, Let's say dynamite to a metal tube like Wile E. Coyote. He had achieved a height of 1,870 feet or 570 meters before his parachute deployed and brought the craft safely back to the ground. Unfortunately, on the fatal attempt, the parachute attached to the rocket deployed prematurely, only a few seconds into the flight. The chute, which was behind the engine and hit by the steam powering it, quickly detached. Without the parachute deploying at the proper time to reduce the rocket's speed for landing, the craft slammed into the desert, killing Hughes on impact. The test flight was reportedly filmed for a TV series called Homemade Astronauts, which was to appear on the US Science Channel. As crazy as testing a homemade rocket sounds, I think it's fair to say Mad Mike Hughes falls closer to the test pilot category than a guy who needlessly offed himself doing something 3 seconds of rational thought would have told him was a bad idea. Our final tale for this video was an easily preventable tragedy of titanic proportions. Yeah, I'm going to take the easy route here and talk about the OceanGate Titan submersible. Since this has been a frequently covered topic since the submersible imploded near the wreck of the Titanic, I'll just give the TLDR version. The owner of OceanGate, Stockton Rush, decided to build his own submersible out of a material everyone told him was unsuitable. He refused to listen, even ignoring warnings when those piloting the vessel informed him of hearing the vessel cracking under pressure. Rush, along with 4 innocent people, were lost at sea when the vessel imploded after the unsuitable material, to the surprise of no one except Stockton Rush, failed. Now, I plan to focus on Stockton Rush quite a bit when I eventually get around to finishing the script for my deeper dive into intrapersonal intelligence video, where I discuss how people lacking self awareness and emotional maturity can be extremely dangerous, so I don't want to spend too much time dunking on him here. Truth be told, I'd planned to do that video before this one, but I kept going off on tangents and just unproductively slinging insults on childish assholes, so I decided to refine the script more and skip this one to the front of the line. I want that video to be a productive, thought provoking discussion and not just a blamestorming session. But I do want to end this video on something more than petulant billionaire, in my opinion, murders 4 people. And for legal reasons, I do want to stress that phrase, in my opinion. Now, at the depth the Titan submersible's hull failed, the pressure was 6,000 psi. In case you're wondering, 40 psi is defined as the threshold for lethality. They were hit with a pressure value 150 times that. With that kind of pressure moving in at the speed it was moving, those inside the sub either didn't feel it at all, or if they did, they only felt it for milliseconds before the lights went out. They didn't suffer. And that does it for this video. For the record, if you're going to test something, make sure to do it in as safe a manner as possible. Otherwise, some random guy on the internet might make a most likely unflattering video about you. If you like this video, or can't believe the thoughtlessness of some of these people, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment on, or share the video. And don't forget to ring the notification bell for more weekly content. As always, thanks for watching.